book, you focus, if I remember correctly, on 3 of the Commandos, not to the exclusion of the others, but that's where the focus was. If you could just briefly give us a little bit of background of Peter Masters, Manfred Ganz, who you mentioned, and Colin Anson.
Yes, and yeah, so I decided when I told the story that I was telling the story of X Troop, which was about 86 men, but I wanted to tell it through 3 who I thought were paradigmatic of different experiences, and also very importantly had a lot of archival material, and all these guys did, and also had families who had information to share. And so I worked with all the families of these 3 as well, and they were very different, the 3 of them. Colin Anson came from a loving middle class, totally acculturated family in Germany. He did not know he was Jewish. And his father decided to tell him he was Jewish when he was like 13 with the rise of Nazism, because he was worried that Colin would start not liking the Jews, not realizing, because this was what was in the air, and that Colin would not know his background. So he sat his son down and he said, look, I need you to know that you're actually Jewish. Once his son finds out, unfortunately, this is when everything starts to change. He gets kicked out of his public school for being Jewish. It's terrible. And the worst day of his life is what I actually start the book with, is when he's sitting with his dad at a beer house in Germany. And some people start saying all this stuff about Hitler that's positive, and his dad cannot take it anymore. And he starts to speak out against these people, speaking in positive terms about Hitler. Somebody calls the police in, and I tell the whole story in the book, and the police take his dad away. And while he's sitting there with his father, his dad's sent to Dachau, and like 2 weeks later, they come to his door and said his father died of like a heart attack or something. He was probably killed there. So he ends up very poor. His mother's not Jewish, but he's considered Jewish, and he considers himself Jewish after this. His mother loses her job because she was married to a Jewish guy who she refused to divorce. And then she gets him on one of the kinder transports at the very oldest age you're allowed to go. I think he's 17. And he has a very terrifying journey on the kinder transport. The Nazis come on the train. They throw all the kids' luggage off. They make the kids jump off the train. Eventually, finally, he makes it to the UK. And he's one of the only ones in the book who does not get interred, because he ended up helping out at this farm during those years. But when he's selected for the X Troop, it's absolutely transformational for him, because he never feels he has any confidence or strength or warriorness to him, and he quickly learns how to do it. And it's a huge transformation for him. And he ends up being one of the only ones who serves in Sicily and the Mediterranean and makes a crucial difference in those battles. So I focus on him primarily because he goes into those campaigns. The other 2 I talk about both land at D-Day. One of them, who's probably the person I speak about most in the book, is Manfred Ganz, raised in an Orthodox Jewish family, which was unusual in Germany at this time. Very Orthodox, very religious, very Zionist family. With the rise of Nazism, his family responds by making him learn even more Hebrew. One of his brothers makes his way to Palestine, and his parents are wealthy. And with the outbreak of the war, they too see the writing on the wall. They put him on a train by himself to the UK, and they go into hiding. And he ends up being probably the most capable warrior I write about in the book, at the forefront of all the campaigns. And for him, it's very complicated because he's Orthodox, but he decides, as I write about in the book, that it's a mitzvah to kill Hitler and to fight the Nazis. And as his kids told me, it sounds like a very hard decision. It was an easy decision. It would, as his kids said, he would do whatever it took to fight the Germans. Whatever it took, he was going to do it. And he ends up being at all of the campaigns of the war in Europe. He lands at D-Day. I can tell you later about that. Makes a huge difference at D-Day. He's at the Battle of the Bulge. Everywhere. He's everywhere. And then he has an incredible story about looking for his parents in the last days of the war that I write about in the book. The third person I wrote about, I wanted to write about somebody from Vienna. So I wrote about Peter Masters. He came from a very cultured Viennese family. He wanted to be an artist, and with the Anschluss and the outbreak of the war, his family realizes they're in deep trouble because they're Jewish. He's bullied. It's very terrible. He manages to escape with his sister and his mother on a train, again, another train. They make their way to the UK. Peter very excitedly gets accepted to art school in London, and then he's locked up and interred. And when he's interred, he decides he needs to fight the Germans and join the British military. So he's the third one that I focus on in the book. And he also does the Normandy landings, and he goes through France and makes a big difference in the war.